September the 8th, the wreck of the Zanzibar. Today I found a turtle. I think it's called a leatherback turtle. I found one once before, but it was dead. This one has been washed up alive. Father had sent me down to collect driftwood on Rushy Bay. He said that there'd be plenty after a storm like that. He was right. I'd been there for half an hour or so, heaping up the wood, before I noticed the turtle in the tide line of piled seaweed. I thought at first he was just a washed-up tree stump covered in seaweed. He was upside down on the sand. I pulled the seaweed off him. His eyes were open, unblinking. He was more dead than alive, I thought. His flippers were quite still and held out to the clouds above as if he was worshipping them. He was massive, as long as this bed and wider. He had a face like a 200-year-old man, wizened and wrinkled and wise with a gently smiling mouth. I looked around and there were more gulls gathering. They were silent, watching, waiting. And I knew well enough what they were waiting for. I pulled away more of the seaweed and saw that the gulls had already been at him. There was blood under his neck, where the skin had been pecked. I'd got there just in time. I bombarded the gulls with pebbles and they flew off protesting noisily, leaving me alone with my turtle. I knew it would be impossible to roll him over, but I tried anyway. I could rock him back and forth on his shell, but I could not turn him over, no matter how hard I tried. After a while I gave up and sat down beside him on the sand. His eyes kept closing slowly, as if he was dropping off to sleep, or maybe he was dying. I couldn't be sure. I stroked him under his chin, where I thought he would like it, keeping my hand well away from his mouth. A great curling storm wave broke and came tumbling towards us. When it went hissing back over the sand, it left behind a broken spar. A spar is like a big broken plank of wood. It was as if the sea was telling me what to do. I dragged the spar up the beach. Then I saw the turtle's head go back and his eyes closed. I've often seen seabirds like that. Once their heads go back, there's nothing you can do. But I couldn't just let him die. I couldn't. I shouted at him. I shook him. I told him he wasn't to die, that I'd turn him over somehow, that it wouldn't be long. I dug a deep hole in the sand beside him. I would lever him up and topple him in. I drove the spar into the sand underneath his shell. I drove it in again and again until it was as deep as I could get it. I hauled back on it and felt him shift. I threw all my weight on it, and at last he tumbled over into the hole, and the right way up too. But when I scrambled over to him, his head lay limp in the sand, his eyes closed to the world. There wasn't a flicker of life about him. He was dead. I was quite sure of it now. It's silly, I know. I'd only known him for a few minutes, but I felt I had lost a friend. I made a pillow of soft sea lettuce for his head and knelt beside him. I cried till there were no more tears to cry, and then I saw the gulls were back. They knew too. I screamed at them, but they just glared at me and moved in closer. "No!" I cried. "No!" I would never let them have him, never. I piled a mountain of seaweed on top of him, and my driftwood on top of that. The next tide would take him away. I left him and went home. I went back to Rushy Bay this evening at high tide, just before nightfall, to see if my turtle was gone. He was still there. The high tide had not been high enough. The gulls were gone though, all of them. I really don't know what made me want to see his face once more. I pulled the wood and seaweed away until I could see the top of his head. As I looked, it moved and lifted. He was blinking up at me. He was alive again. I could have kissed him, really I could, but I didn't quite dare. He's still there now, all covered up against the gulls, I hope. In the morning, I had to stop writing because Father just came in. He hardly ever comes in my room, so I knew at once something was wrong. "You all right?" he said, standing in the doorway. "What have you been up to?" "Nothing," I said. "Why?" "Old Man Jenkins. He said he saw you down on Rushy Bay." "I was just collecting the wood," I told him as calmly as I could. Like you said I should. I find lying so difficult. I'm just not good at it. He thought you were crying your eyes out, he says. I was not, I said, but I dared not look at him. I pretended to go on writing in my diary. You are telling me the truth, Laura. He knew I wasn't. He knew it. Of course, I said. I just wished he would go. What do you find to write in that diary of yours? He asked. Things, I said, just things. And he went out and shut the door behind him. He knows something, but he doesn't know what. I'm going to have to be very careful. If Father finds out about the turtle, I'm in trouble. He's only got to go down to Rushy Bay and look. That turtle would just be food to him, and to anyone else who finds him. We're all hungry. Everyone is getting hungrier every day. I should tell him. I know I should. But I can't do it. I just can't let them eat him. In the morning, early, I'll have to get him back into the sea. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but somehow I will. I must. Now it's not only the gulls I have to save him from.